Shall I move this a bit closer? So we've got a brand new, well, actually it's in progress, system for speakers and nice fresh screens and everything. So welcome to City Hall. We've got some new technology. This is the first time it's ever been used, so hopefully it'll be more reliable than it was in the past. I'd like to particularly welcome the members of the public who've come here today to participate in the democratic process, and also all of those watching at home on the webcast via the YouTube channel. I'd particularly like to welcome members of the committee and ask them to introduce themselves. So I'll start with Emma.
Councillor Emma Edwards, Bishopston and Ashley Down Ward.
Rob Breyer, Councillor for St George West.
Councillor David Wilcox for Lockleys Ward in Bristol.
Nicholas Coombs, Westbury and Henleys.
Councillor Tim Rippington, Brislington East.
Councillor Kaz Self, Southmead Ward.
Councillor Tom Renhard, Horfield Ward.
And I'm Graham Morris, Stockwood Ward.
There's no fire drill plan, so if there is, the fire alarm does sound, then we all will need to leave the room quietly via the lobby area, the main front door of City Hall, turn right, walk down the ramp towards the cathedral, and the assembly point is in front of the cathedral. To everyone in the room, we do ask that people speak with courtesy and respect, and make sure that this is a place where we have a free and open and respectful exchange of views. So agenda item 2, apologies for absence and substitutions. I haven't had any apologies, but I would like to welcome a new member on the committee, which is Councillor Tom Renard. So welcome, and are there any declarations of interest?
Chair, I just wanted to make clear that although it's not a pecuniary interest, I do use Rosemary Lane most days. I think it's worth bearing that in mind.
Okay, so that will be recorded in the minutes. I'd like to move the minutes of the previous meeting held of this committee held on the 23rd of October as a correct record. Would anyone like to second that? Graham, thank you. Are people content to confirm the minutes as a correct record to be signed by me as the chair? Everyone's agreed to that. That's great. The next agenda item is Chair's announcements. As ever, there's been a number of officer-delegated decisions that have been published between the last committee and this committee. That's where the delegation has been given to the Executive Director, and we have all of those are published. Another thing I'm quite pleased to announce is that the Post Office are going to be doing a trial of a power-assisted walking trolley in one of 3 cities in the country, which is a motor that provides dynamic assistance to postal walkers on steep and extended routes, which allows staff to carry heavier loads over longer distances without physical strain, thereby reducing van dependency, cutting carbon emissions and improving working conditions. That's being trialled thanks to the Highways Authority giving it permission in the Bristol South and Fishponds delivery offices. So if you see this rather interesting contraption, which is an electric power-assisted trolley, then that's something that we're rolling out, and we're very proud to be one of the cities piloting that, along with the Slant, the Royal Mail and the University of Plymouth. For those of you with long memories, I would like to offer condolences to the family of Mike Ginger. He was the first ever cycling officer outside of London, who worked for Bristol City Council between about 1990 and about 2010. He broke a lot of new ground, a lot of the cycle infrastructure we see, which is now looking a little bit old, and legacy cycle infrastructure was developed by him. And he also actually rolled out modal filters and other traffic calming measures in both Montpellier and Knoll. One of my residents who's lived there for over 30 years says he used to have 8,000 cars going past his house every day, and it took him up to 20 minutes to get out of his drive in his car. He now has a few cars turning around outside it. So Mike broke new ground, and actually 1 year Venue magazine made him the Bristolian of the Year for the work he was doing. Apparently my predecessor, who was the politician at the time, was rather miffed by this and felt that they should have had that accolade, but it was given to the officer. And his legacy lives on. In fact, one of the things we're talking about later on is upgrading the cycle network that we have, and a lot of that is thanks to Mike and his work back over those 20 years. So I'd like to offer condolences to his family. The other thing I'd like to do, and he's still very much alive, but is to thank Don Alexander for his work as this committee, and I particularly valued him because he offered some continuity in the work, because he was the person who held the equivalent of this brief immediately before me. And again, I'd like to reflect that the decisions we make, just like Mike Ginger, we will have a legacy for many, many years. We literally sometimes set things in concrete, and even if we start new bus services, which Tim and I and other members of this committee were very proud to do with Clean Air Zone, that can take 2, 3, 4 years before they really prove themselves. I'm also very proud that we continue to work, looking before Don, at the strategy developed by Councillor Threlfall and actually finally approved by Councillor Dudd. And that strategy is something we're still working on now, and we're very happy to adopt it and actually implement it. And I'd like to remind ourselves all that we need to try and make evidence-based decisions. That evidence is both from the feedback from the community, but also as to how we best deliver our strategy. And I'd like to remind ourselves, and it'll take me a moment just to get this up, but by 2036, if we do nothing and allow things to go as they are, then carbon emissions from transport in this city will go up by 22%. Delays will go up by 40%. Vehicle trips will go up by 26%. Time spent queuing in traffic will go up by 74%, and journey times will go up by 9%. That is figures given to us by actually a Conservative Metro Mayor back in 2020. So in the next 10 years, we could see time spent queuing in traffic up by 74% if we don't do anything. So we need to try and be strategic and make... And actually, we need to cut congestion by 25% over the next 20 years just to stand still. And in certain areas, for example, Southville, we're looking, if all the site allocations come to fruition, we are looking at a 40% growth in the number of homes. So in places like Southville and in Temple Quarter, those concerns and those pressures on our transport system will be all the more. Anyway, let's get on with the business of the day. So the first thing we have is the public forum. Because we've had an unprecedented number of questions and statements, and we have 2 petitions, I've extended, to make sure that the members of the public have a fair time to have their say, I'm going to extend public forum by up to, from the normal 30 minutes to up to 45 minutes. So I hope that, nevertheless, because we have so many people involved and so many people wanting to have their say, we are going to still need to be quite disciplined, and we have a minute each for the petitions and then a minute each for everyone's statements, and then we'll get on to the questions, and obviously they can be a little bit unpredictable. So, first up, we have Sebastian Davis. Are you here to present your permission? Hello, Sebastian. You have a petition saying stop pavement obstruction, improve pedestrian safety on Whitehall Road.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here on behalf of the residents of Whitehall Road to request action to stop vehicles mounting and obstructing the pavement outside the laundrette. This happening daily right beside the zebra crossing and puts pedestrians at risk. I personally witnessed vehicles mounting the curb, cars reversing off the drop curve onto oncoming traffic, and several near misses. Cars often park on the pavement with their engines running and bright LED lights on, creating distractions for drivers and further hazards for pedestrians. Cars parked right up against the crossing reduces visibility even more. I made many reports to the police, and the only outcome was a single poster on the laundrette, which was immediately removed by them. I reported this problem to my local councillor, Jenny Bartle, and have also contacted the MP, who are now working together to try and secure funding to prevent future accidents. We're asking the council to replace the zigzag lines with WO lines to enable enforcement, and to install bollards to physically prevent vehicles from mounting the pavement. I understand bollards are not available immediately, but we would welcome any temporary measure, such as planters, to deter pavement parking in the meantime. The situation's gone far too long, and it's a matter of time before someone gets seriously injured. Thank you for your time.
thank you for keeping perfectly to 1 minute. Thank you, Seb. We've noted that and do hope that you can work with your area committee and your local councillors to pursue those ideas. Next is Jennifer Hill. Hello, Jennifer. Your petition was ban HGVs from Marlborough Hill.
We want traffic measures that will prevent heavy goods vehicles over 7.5 tonnes using Marlborough Hill in order to protect other road users and the house at 6 Kingsdown Parade. This house has been struck a number of times by HGVs attempting to turn left at the top of Marlborough Hill, mounting the pavement and hitting the house, causing damage to the building and also posing a danger to pedestrians and other road users. Councillors, council officials and the transport manager at the BRI have all agreed that Marlborough Hill is not suitable for HGVs and there is no need for vehicles over 7.5 tonnes to use this route. Section 106 money has been identified which can be used for highway measures to improve Marlborough Hill. So we want an immediate assessment of all the measures to prevent HGV access, as well as temporary measures to mitigate the danger caused by the HGVs that continue to use this route.
And thank you also for being very succinct and keeping to time.
Well, I hope people have seen my statement as well, which gives more background.
I mean, if you want to make your statement as well, then you may. My response is that we are looking at some immediate measures to try and protect that junction, which will take out some parking to make that movement, unfortunately, easier for HGVs, so that we can do something immediately, and then hopefully you can work with the area committee to use that Section 106 funding to do something more long-standing. So hopefully that will be of some help. We now move on to public statements. And I have a list of the people that want to come. I'm going to call out everyone's names, just to make sure that if you have come, that we know you're here. So, but I'm going to do it quite rapidly and just shout if you hear your name.
Do you have an indication of who's here?
Okay. So, Gemma Wright, Samira Moose, Laura Clough, Corey Cunning, Jan Ratcliffe, Kelly Smallcombe. Yes. But I think Kelly's here, but to observe only. Is that correct? Okay. You don't want to speak? Okay. Melissa Topping.
Caroline would like to speak for...
You're speaking for... okay, Caroline. You're speaking on behalf of Melissa, who can't make it tonight.
Hello. I would like to make it quite clear that I am effectively Melissa Topping at the minute. To start, I read her brief speech to go with her statement. Fellow committee meetings, I, Melissa, stand here tonight on an anniversary. 1 year ago, this council told me, Melissa, and the people of East Bristol that it had not breached the Equalities Act because it had consulted the Barton Hill Disabilities Group, a group that did not and does not exist. You didn't just fail to consult the vulnerable, you fabricated consent. And 1 year later, we are still subjected to this discrimination. This failure of process is dwarfed only by your failure of safety. 4 months ago, family watched their house gutted by fire in Barton Hill. Nearly a month ago, the fire service's own freedom of information responses confirmed fire crews were delayed by the very measures we discussed tonight. Yet you are still hiding behind the claim that you are consulting, in inverted commas, with emergency services to make changes. Consultation time is over, the evidence is in the ashes of that home, and the delay is on your conscience. Finally, to the local economy, to offer a grant for outside seating to businesses whose trade has been annihilated is a cruel tone-deaf insult. They do not need cushions for ghost customers, they need their livelihoods back. How about half the rates? The East Bristol livable neighbourhood is not livable. It is discriminatory, dangerous, and it is destroying our local economy. You have had a year to fix your breaches of trust, safety, and of community. To end, the time for trials and endless consultation is over. The time for decisive action is now. Please remove the barriers. Take positive action to protect our safety. Thank you on behalf of Melissa Topping.
Thank you, Caroline. Jennifer Hill, do you want to... if you want to speak again, you have a statement and you have a minute if you want to say anything else. Okay. Yes. I think the committee have all read the statements. Thank you. Sue Hughes? No. I've got a whole list of names here. So what we're going to do is going to go to the people that have indicated they're actually here, and then if there's anyone left at the end, we'll take their statements. Ken Fife, are you here? Yes. So you have a minute to make your statement.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank the policy team for all their work constructing this vast set of... thanking the policy team for putting together this vast agenda, and particularly Sam Wilcock. I mean, I don't know how you managed to do it actually ahead of time. There's so much to be said about this, and obviously I've only got a minute. I'm not going to go over the points that I made in my statement, which I hope is clear. If you look at all the statements together, what is notable, of course, is the absolutely extraordinary reaction against this scheme as it stands at the minute. I don't think anybody meant any harm. Of course, they didn't mean any harm, and the chair has outlined reasons why there are great problems with pollution and so on. I'd just like to say, though, a couple of things. First of all, I think there's a lack of understanding of people's actual lives in Southfield, Bedminster, and in the whole of South Bristol. People cannot live in this with this kind of scheme as it's implemented, not being able to travel around to pick up other people's children, to take them to school, to get to work in North Bristol, to access the M32 and the motorway system, to pick up other people to take them to work, or to go to the shop in Asda, which is now threatened because of foolish decisions on the part of the traffic team, and so on, about the Bedminster bridges. The thing is very worrying, but one must go ahead with it. It has to be salvaged because the scheme is obviously going to go ahead. And I can see why it's happened, because that's how councils work, particularly if they've got no money, which is the case at the moment. Do the best we can, but I would urge the team which is looking at this, who all mean well, to actually talk to the residents about their actual problems. I went to one of the consultation events. The officer I spoke to was not interested in what I had to say. She didn't take a single note. She kept insisting on the importance of children and being able to walk safely up Stackpool Road. They can walk safely up Stackpool Road as it is. Everybody's already said...
Ken, can you wrap it up now, please?
So I would urge the council to work with residents and really think about people's lives, both inside and Southfield, Bedminster, and beyond that in South Bristol, who need to get to work.
Thank you, Ken. The next on my list is Hayden Gill.
Cool. Evening, I'm here to talk in support of the East Bristol livable neighbourhood. I voted for the councillors who supported it. I completed all the consultations over several years and waited patiently for the measures to be introduced. Good stuff. The detractors we've heard from today mustn't be happy with the former mayor's decision to not put bollards on Great Western Lane, making this street the last shortcut through Barton Hill between Feeder Road and Days Road. Although I've not heard them once talk about this lane, which is odd, as it's an example of what they want for every small lane in Barton Hill. What was a quiet lane is now hundreds of cars, vans and the odd lorry. The traffic every morning and evening passes Barton Hill Academy from drivers with no link to Barton Hill, no children to drop off, just saving a few seconds off the journey. Whilst the trial does need a few tweaks and will never be perfect, it's a load better than what we had before the livable neighbourhood was in, when every street was dangerous due to shortcutting drivers. Thank you.
Thank you, Hayden. Next I have on the list is David Redgewell.
Thanks, Ed. Well, I'm not going to complain about the need for the bus lanes across the city. I said that yesterday, so very happy with the bus lanes all the way from Whitchurch and Stockwood all the way through to Crooks Causeway. So there's no problem there for disabilities, no problem for access. What I am concerned about is the joined-upness of WECA and Bristol City Council, because we're in a bus crisis. Those services that we have on the streets now, if we don't get the transport levy from this council, and South Gloss, and North Somerset, and Baines, and the DFT money, then I've been with WECA officers today as the member of the bus advisory panel for passengers and equalities, and we will be sitting down with you and other political leaders, and we will be cutting services. Now, this is serious. Some of those buses in South Bristol, we rely on Somerset Council. I was with them at 2 o'clock this afternoon to actually provide the services that you rely on through South Bristol. They're funded by Somerset. So the funding is the issue. You can build as many bus lanes, Ed, as you like, as far as I'm concerned. You know that. But we need the buses to run on them, and that is the worry. The real worry is the subsidies. First group's not economically viable without the subsidy, nor is Stagecoach. 60% of money comes from the public purse. So my point really is to make clear that we can build as much infrastructure, but we need to think about how we're going to provide that bus network. Thanks very much.
Thank you, David. Next on the list, I've got Terry Brammer.
I wish to highlight the term connectivity in your committee's title. The SBLN will destroy our existing connectivity, as we'll no longer be able to drive through our area when we need to. You seem to forget our need for cars. Not everyone can walk to bus stops or shops, and not everyone with needs has access to a blue badge. Your approach seems driven by control rather than by genuine concern for community needs. And surely a more effective strategy would focus on making short car journeys to reduce pollution and support access. Ultimately, true connectivity should enhance and not restrict. The introduction of monitoring systems begs the question for whom and why, plus the possibility you may manipulate data to support your predetermined outcomes. Surely vital components of connectivity are heart and soul, connection and inclusion, and in the plans for the SBLN, these are entirely absent. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Brendan.
Thanks, I just wanted to first address, sorry I didn't reply to any emails. I have had a lot of internal emails sent to Cross Country Trade Limited lately. But on the topic of this meeting, we have got 90 bus services across the west of England that rely on public funding. I'm sure all of us in this committee, all of us that are looking across at me, we have all seen the sad news about First Kerno stopping operations in February 2026. If we do not get the right funding for bus services, then this could happen in our region if WECA do not provide the right funding. We've also got issues with Metro West services where there is no lift at Nailsea and Backwell and Weston-super-Mare stations, despite being promised for many years. We've also got issues with the Great Western Railway Intercity Express train fleet operating local services to Worcester and Gloucester. Now, at Yates Cam and Dursley, a wheelchair user cannot board an IET because the only wheelchair space is in Coach E on a 5-car IET, yet only 4 of the 5 cars fit on the platform at Yates Cam and Dursley. And the reason I am bringing it to this board meeting is because WECA pay for the Metro West services, even though it is a Great Western Railway service. On regards to the bus service, we need clarity of what funding is available for next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brendan. Imran Iqbal.
Hello there. I represent the Tottenham Mosque Committee Management Committee. So regarding South Bristol livable neighbourhood, so far we've completed a paper-based paper petition based on Part B of the consultation, as we had a lot of feedback that the online petition was overly long. We've also done a custom online petition trying to get across the final points that we wanted to get across around the usage of the mosque. I've put through an online statement, which I hope the committee have read, which again kind of represents some of the same points. The point of all of this is trying to really drive home the point about the huge usage of the mosque in Totterdown and how the Muslim community will be disproportionately affected by the current plans. We hope that we thank Councillor Powden for coming to speak to us before and trying to put some of our fears at ease. But we hope the committee kind of accepts the concerns that we have. I would like it to be minuted, really, if that is accepted. And really, we think the whole process should be stopped. We're willing and happy to work with the council and the planning committee to try and find something that is a suitable solution for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Imran. Next is Caroline Dunn, being yourself this time.
Can you please make some reasonable adjustments for the fact that speaking under stress, I get breathless? To start, I am here yet again to say, and my statement says yet again, that while I know you Plowden say the ultimate goal is to remove all cars from the city, we cannot do that because apart from anything else, there are disabled people like me that need our cars to get about, and your plans are constantly putting us in a position of being even more disabled because you are removing our access to things, our access to places. And I wish to make one example. I have to say that on the 25th of November, it was the UN International Day for the elimination of violence against women and girls, a cause very close to my heart. Is this actually on, and can people hear me? Fine, thank you. And I am a member of the Red Crafters group, which has all the red dresses in George's Park, trying to pull attention, as the only real group in Bristol doing so, to the fact of violence against women and girls, how appalling it is, and how at least 2 women a week are killed in our countries in the United Kingdom. And this is a really crucial thing, and it is a really crucial day. And there was a candlelit vigil to also draw attention to this, which Missing Link hold every year, and it was held in the centre. And I could not attend because you have made it almost impossible for me and my car to get into the centre. It's an incredibly long way round to get there, and I can't actually get into the centre. The closest I can get is Queen's Park, and I cannot walk from there. And even if I were to be able to get into the centre, coming down through the various bits from Stokescroft and all the rest of it, there is absolutely no disabled parking spaces for me to be able to park, even temporarily, to go and attend such a crucial, such an important event. So I am here to say tonight, please read my statement, realise that the plans you have for Broadmead will totally remove my access to Broadmead. You will totally remove my access to these glorious events you're going to hold in the new public spaces, to all the shopping, to all the retail. But it is not just me. I am only one of very many. Sadly, there are many people in the city who, either for reasons of disability such as my health or ageing or accidents, are totally dependent on cars and their blue badges. And please, can you just start realising that the 2010 Act was created for a very good reason? You need to start observing it, and you need to start realising that when we have a blue badge, it means you need to allow us to park close enough to something,
Caroline,
and not just closer than an able-bodied person. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Caroline, we're moving on to... sorry. First up, is there anyone here who has submitted a statement who hasn't yet had a chance to read it? To speak. Okay. The first person up, because there was an administrative problem last time, Caroline, would you like a break and to regain your breath, and we'll come back to you, or are you happy to go straight on to your questions, Caroline? Should we come back to you at the end, Caroline? Okay. Apparently the next person here is Alistair. I'm not sure how to pronounce your surname. Maybe you could let me know. Alistair?
I don't think he's here.
No.
No, it's Jennifer's.
So, Jennifer, you had some questions? Jennifer Hill?
She's new, so she might want clarification.
Removing some parking bays could
Jennifer, what I should have said is that all the questions and the answers have been published earlier today. So hopefully you've had a chance to read the answer, and this is a chance for you to ask any follow-up questions rather than rehearse what's already been published. So if you've read the answers and you've still got some questions, then please let's just focus on the follow-up questions.
Yeah, this is a follow-up question.
Okay.
So the suggestion from the response I had was to remove some parking bays at the top of Marlborough Hill. But removing some parking bays could improve the situation for my house, possibly, if paired with road markings to guide HGVs to make a wide circle when turning left. But what will you do to assess the long-term dangers to road users and the permanent measures required to prevent HGVs using Marlborough Hill, as required by all who signed the petition?
Adam, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, so the process for longer term schemes is to go via the area committee process. So to register your concerns with the area committee, we will then come to the area committee to look at the issues that have been raised and recommend solutions to the issues that the residents and councillors have put forward, and then there'll be a decision by the area committee as to which issues they want to fund for changes.
Right. I don't really understand the process, but what's the timescale here with the area committee?
So I mean, I could send you a link that explains the process, if that would be helpful.
Okay.
Have we got details to respond to? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's
okay.
It's not as good as it used to be.
The measures that were suggested are facilitating HGVs to use that route rather than preventing them.
So I think the answer is that's a quick win, which we can do relatively inexpensively and try and actually resolve the situation in the short term. And then I think you've found Section 106 funding, which could very well be applied to this and will cover the legal costs of putting in the weight limit. But that's something you have to work through with the area committee, and I'm sure that your councillors Guy and Mohammed would help you navigate that system, because we're actually inviting applications to those at the moment or imminently.
So I can ask one more question, can I? Okay, so the development that this Section 106 money attaches to is on the edge of Area 4, but the impact is felt in Area 3. Can the funding allocation be decided by the Area 3 committee? And what's the timescale for getting the necessary measures actually in place rather than just being discussed?
I think the answer is that Area Committee 4 can put those, would need to actually determine how to spend Section 106. Because it's allocated to that committee, but I don't think there's anything to stop them kind of treating the boundary as permeable between the area committees. Is that better? And I don't think we can commit to a timescale right now, but that can be something that we work through with the area committee. So I'm sorry, that's probably not that's not a very specific answer. I don't know if there's anything you can add to that, Adam.
I think that covers it. You know, we can, I assume, be flexible between the area committees to ensure that we're resolving a problem. I mean, it'll be for the area committees to make the decision on what they want to spend the funding on. Section 106 money is, I guess, a little bit more flexible than the area committee still. So I can take that away and ask the team to look into it for you.
And will
Yeah, I'll ask them to send you a response setting out the area committee process for you. Yeah.
I am finding it hard to hear everything that's being said. Apparently I shouldn't be too close because it will distort. We've got questions from Melissa, but she's not here. David, you've got questions, and then I'll go back to Caroline. So, as ever, you should have seen the answers to your question, Dave. So,
very, very distinct. I mean, I spend a lot of time reading the WECA Act. Act 2020 to 2021, when Bristol, and I don't know which, could have been Kai, it could have been the Mayor, it could have been Don. Somebody signed over the powers from this authority to the West Midlands Combined Authority for Transport and left this authority, the Highway Authority. No problem.
So can we get to a question, please, David?
So the question is, the answer I got was, it's down to the Combined Authority on the bus services for the bus lanes. Well, the point I make is this. What discussions are taking place with the Combined Authority about the transport levy this authority has to pay to fund those bus services? Because however much I love Helen, I love you. You don't have the preset money, and that is a problem. So what is happening about that levy? That is what's worrying bus passengers.
I'm going to ask John Smith here to answer that one.
Good evening, David. Thank you for the question. We're in very active discussion with... thank you. Can you hear me, David?
Yeah, come on.
Okay. So we're in active discussion with the Combined Authority and the other unitary authorities about the levy. So that's ongoing now, but I can assure you we're working very actively on that, and we will have a solution in time for the budget process, which will come to this chamber in terms of the council's budget in February.
I think, Dave, one of the difficulties that we've got is that we still haven't had the announcement by central government as to what the bus grant is next year. We have to register those services towards the end of January, so we've been left with a real cliff edge. We don't know if we're going to get 100% of what we got last year or 75%. Those are the scenarios that have been given to us, and we still haven't got that from the Labour government. And it's making it extremely difficult to plan ahead financially within the unitary authorities and when we come together as a combined authority. So I would urge the government to get on with it, and if they can give us a 3-year funding envelope, that would make a massive difference as well. Have you got a second follow-up question, David?
Yeah, the second question is, I told you, there's no problem with you can build as many bus lanes as you lot down the Wells Road through to Southmead and Cribs Causeway. Perfect for me and my bus passengers, the people I represent. The issue I still have there is about how we fund those services. Are we talking to Somerset? Because South Bristol is being served by Somerset Council. Brendan's right. First South West is pulling out of Cornwall. I understand from meeting with Somerset yesterday, First South West again has agreed or continued funding services for another 6 months.
Can we get it to a question, David?
So my question is, what discussions are really taking place with Somerset Council and Baines on that corridor? Because they're not in our WECA funding stream, they're in theirs, and that is really important for people living in Knoll, Totterdown, Windmill Hill, Whitchurch, etc., that rely on services down to Wales, Taunton, Yeovil, and Bridgewater for their services.
So I think the short answer to that is that really is something that WECA's doing. We're focused very much on our contribution to the WECA funding pot for supported services, and WECA would need to be in liaison with Wiltshire, Gloucestershire and Somerset. Thanks, David. Caroline, and coming back to you, you've got up to two, as ever, you should have seen the answers to your questions, so you've got up to two follow-up questions, please, Caroline.
Right. Well, thank you for the answers so far, but you haven't actually really answered my question 3. Do you actually have any plans, or are you actually in active discussion with the Fire Authority Service to be able to evacuate disabled people, as I refer to in my question 3?
I'm happy to answer that. So we have had various discussions and meetings with the Fire Authority about various matters, but including EBLN, and we are on ongoing discussions, and where they raise any issues or concerns, we've already addressed a number of those, and we'll be taking account of that as we go forward in the design of the scheme.
Well, I'm raising a concern, and I've raised it quite clearly in question 3. Do you have any plans? Bristol City Council has to have plans for major incidents to evacuate the whole city, and going on all the way down to minor incidents. Do you to repeat my first supplementary question, do you actually have any plans for the evacuation of EBLN and obviously in future the SBLN, if it goes ahead in any form similar, to evacuate the disabled people? This was my question, and my supplementary is saying that my first supplementary is saying you haven't answered it. Do you actually have any plans? Are you actually in active consultation with the fire services to formulate and construct those plans?
So I think the response would be that all those residences are still accessible by the fire service. We're working with them to ensure that they're as accessible as possible, and where they raise issues with us, we're picking up those issues and looking to make changes. So the existing plans that would apply would still apply, and we are working with the fire service to ensure access to all properties as easy as possible.
Yes, but if you have a major fire incident, then a lot of people are going to want to leave the area as soon as possible, and they would be being advised to do so, and they will be unable to do so, which is why I'm asking, do you have any specific plan for evacuation in such circumstances? I'm sorry to try to repeat this again, but you don't seem to get my question.
I think the answer to your question is that the council has plans for civil contingencies unit who have plans. There's no specific plans because any particular incident is unique and dynamic. So what it has is a set of plans and a set of protocols and a framework so that they can work dynamically to respond to any individual incident with the emergency services. Did you have another follow-up question, Caroline?
Yes, I did, but I'd just like to say, but obviously the situation has changed a lot. When was those contingencies you talk about updated last, for example? We've had the EBLN in place for at least a year. So you need to consider updating it, and I suspect you haven't. My second supplementary question is, with respect to question 1, you're saying that you can't give the answer, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate why, but can we have the breakdown I've asked for in writing as soon as possible when this review and audit is in fact available, please? I want to determine how much you're spending on helping disabled people, as the question makes clear.
So yeah, I mean, once the review and audit is completed, we'll be bringing that forward to say these are the elements that we're prioritising, and we'll be happy to publish the review.
So you will publish a breakdown, as I've asked for, as soon as the audit and review has been completed. Yes?
So it will be in a suitable format, and we'll publish it at the appropriate time when a decision is due to be made.
By suitable format, will it be one that's intelligible to me? Namely, will it make clear what is there for disabled people?
Caroline, we can't answer that question, but what we can do is respond to any further questions you have on that's been published. I'm going to move us on now. The next person is Sue Hughes. Are you here, Sue?
No, I don't have shoes.
No, Sue? I think it's Helen Hughes is next. Helen.
Thank you. Yeah, it's nice to be back here. And Ed, thank you very much for extending the time for the public forum today. I think that's really good.
I've done it. Caroline, I'm glad I've managed finally to do something right.
Credit where credit's due.
I was actually going to answer one of your questions, which is about whether or not, I can't answer for everyone else, but it talks about whether or not I was going to tell you about my own means of transport. Since I started as a candidate for the Green Party, and since I've been a councillor, I've never once used a single occupancy car to move around the city. I've used either public transport or bicycle for everything. I thought it would be just too much of an irony to become a Green Party candidate and a Green Party councillor, and then because I'd be doing extra journeys to do that by using a vehicle, single occupancy vehicle. So I've only ever really used either public transport or a bicycle on my councillor and my Green Party duties. Actually, excuse me, a bit of respect here. I have a visual impairment, which means that I have got an impairment, and it does affect my daily life. So not all impairments and disabilities are visible. So I do think you need to be very careful about what you say before you make assumptions about people's abilities. Thank you. I'd like to ask a follow-up question. Helen. Helen, Brendan, I think you're later on, but Helen, would you like to ask a follow-up question?
Yeah, sure. After that interlude. So, my question was based on my first question to you, which was, just to clarify what Ed was just talking about, I did ask a question if all the Transport Committee members would be prepared to give up their cars to show an example to everyone else. That was my question. So Ed was answering that, yeah, from his own perspective. And I think, Caroline has a point that maybe there are many hidden disabilities, but there are also a lot of people who just can't manage to do without a car. So, my question was about the collateral damage that that may be being caused by attempts to reach climate targets. And I just really wanted, Ken just spoke when he gave a statement and said he was sure no harm was being done by livable neighbourhood schemes or I presume any other traffic measures being taken. And you all look like such decent people who wouldn't want to harm anyone. And that's, I think we'd all probably agree with that. But so do you have no moral or ethical compunction regarding the clear evidence of damage and harm which is being done through the East Bristol so-called livable neighbourhood to people living there now, here and now, in that part of the, not in the future, like there will be people in the future we need to think of, but we also need to think of people who are here and now. Harm and damage is being caused, and that's clear from their statements.
Can you turn this into a question, please, fairly quickly?
Do you have no moral and ethical compunction? Because looking at the stats you quoted at the very beginning, it looks like we might have reached that already just through the implementation of the East Bristol livable neighbourhood, the increase in congestion and the problems with transport and so on.
Oh, yeah.
And it's all in the name of following government directives, I believe, based on climate change targets, which are based on quite a shaky science, which a lot of, I'll finish, which a lot of environmentalists are now also questioning, including myself. I'm a permaculturalist.
I think there's two parts of that question. One is I think there's an overwhelming consensus that large amounts of carbon dioxide are causing global harm. The second, well,
let him speak.
I think there's an overwhelming scientific consensus that that is the case.
Let's let Ed finish. Okay.
The other thing that concerns me is public health. We have the worst air pollution in the East Bristol livable neighbourhood of any, pretty much of any part of the town. We have high rates of asthma, high rates of obesity amongst children. Air pollution causes immeasurable damage to people's, young people's development. It affects all their bodies throughout their lives. It affects their ability to actually, their brain development and their ability for, them to, if I could finish, I did ask everyone to show respect, and I think we need to listen to one another. It causes immense amount of damage to people's bodies throughout their lives, so we have to balance the different harms. So I do accept that some people will suffer harm, but the status quo that we have at the moment is that a lot of people are having lifelong harm. Did you have another follow-up question?
I've got quite a few. I'm just going to try and think of one. So one of the questions is definitely you're predicting stats which will have occurred by 2036, and you want to avoid that. what is actually causing that to happen? I don't sense that people are driving more than they used to since COVID. Particularly, people have been driving less because there's been a lot more working from home. People are in a cost of living crisis. Prices are going up and up and up. We all know that. So it looks like people would be likely to drive less to save money than to drive more. So what's actually, if it's population increase, what's causing the population increase? Which I presume it is this. And is there anything that can be done about that? Oh, did you not?
I'm going to face this way then, because it's quite hard talking that way. The traffic levels are back to what they were pre-pandemic and going above pre-pandemic levels. Yes, there is growing population in Bristol and in the surrounding region. The road network doesn't get any larger, so the same amount of space has to accommodate more people with more trips as people become kind of more able to do new trips again after the pandemic, and more trips become accessible, more people need to use the network. So we're at least back to the same levels as we were pre-pandemic in terms of car trips. And as I say, a growing population puts further pressure onto that network. We prepared some graphs recently looking at trends over the last 10 to 15 years. And what we see is increasing cycle trips, increasing walking trips, increasing bus trips, despite a kind of increasing population, which is necessary in order for us to accommodate all the trips that everyone wants to do, because there is no further road space for additional car trips.
I'm going to move on. Thank you, Helen, for coming again. Is Gary Craven here? I don't see Matt Sanders. He's a frequent flyer here, but I can't see him. Terry Brummer. So again, hopefully you've seen the answers to your questions. Very happy to have a follow-up.
Well, yes, I have a follow-up. It's a general follow-up, but it's still on the South Bristol livable neighbourhood, so I think it's fair enough to ask this. But I'd like to preface it by saying that today on the John Darvill show, Councillor Dyer stated his frustration that we don't seem to, and I'm not quoting here, so I'm speaking from vague memory, stated his frustration that we don't seem to understand the South Bristol livable neighbourhood will only be implemented, and I need to check with you people if this is correct, because this is what I'm pretty sure he said, will only be implemented if enough people want it. It will not be implemented if enough don't want it. That's pretty much what he said. And that was the cause of his frustration, because we don't seem to see that it won't be implemented if enough people... Oh, sorry, my brain's gone. I'm sure you catch my drift. Damn. My first question is...
You've only got one, Terry, I think.
I should only have one question? Okay, well, in which case, let me just get my... Was it a good question?
Let's just...
Okay, well, let me carry on with the question itself.
Sorry, we're both... Sorry, you have got two questions. Could we...
Yes,
we've only got about 5 minutes left. I've got
okay,
at least a couple
I'll
of other
quick.
people, so if you could try and make these questions as quickly as possible,
What I'd like
please.
to do is just to read through the whole thing, and then you can answer what you can. Ideally, the first one first. So, how are we, the residents, to know what is enough and what is not enough in terms of people saying? Can you state the percentage required? Can you state your criteria to assess whether to implement and how you reach this decision? And if this decision, if made, can be appealed either way? So as Councillor Dyer stated, it wouldn't go ahead if not wanted. Why are you then stating the go-ahead as a certainty, which in so much of the information we come across is the way it's stated? Thank you.
I think the answer to that is that we are looking very carefully at the feedback that we've got to date. We will have another round of work to design things. We're actively considering changes, and I can't predict the future as to whether or not it will go ahead or not.
There were two things that you said there that seem to confuse each other. One is you're going to bring in changes. The other is whether to implement it or not. can you state clearly that there are two levels, that you are going to bring in changes, which seems to confuse everything actually, or you may not go along with it at all? Can you be clear on that?
I'll talk about my ward and about Bedminster ward very quickly because they're not represented here. In my ward, I sense a very strong support for the residents' parking scheme because of the proximity to Temple Meads and Temple Quarter and everything else.
They are, of course, separate issues. One's a livable neighbourhood, which requires different
At the moment, they're wrapped together, so I'm trying to answer your question, which is, and I also sense a very strong support for matchday parking across Bedminster and Ashton. So the answer is we're considering it very, very carefully, all the feedback that we've got, and we will be making changes, and we will be proposing those again, and then there'll be a round of statutory consultation. So there's a number of hoops still to go to, and we're trying to respond to the people. There are people that are very keen on this idea, and there are people who are dead against it, as we know. So we're trying to find a path through that which will attract sufficient support. Thanks, Terry. Next is...
Is it possible, can I just ask this, because it could be a yes or a no. Is it possible that you can bring in things like an extension of residence parking, matchday parking, and maybe a few cross-level crossings and things such, and not bring in the divisions that livable neighbourhoods are that have to be done if livable neighbourhoods come in because of the title?
I think that's a really difficult question to answer because if I say the answer is kind of a simple answer would be yes, but if I say that, then I may not be managing people's expectations well. I'm going to move on to the next one. Is Satwant here?
So, although I asked 3 questions, I've just got one additional question for one of them. So, it was the question around the preventing fraudulent or multiple submissions by bots or non-residents in the EBLN survey. So you guys responded that, you know, capture verification can be hard for people with disabilities, etc., etc. And simple fact is that if you live in Bristol and you're a taxpayer, you've council, why can't there just be user account access to the survey? And that way, even people that don't live in the Bristol City Council area but need to drive through the EBLN area could potentially be opted in for their opinion at an account level with any council, because technically that's quite a straightforward thing to do. Because the way the survey has currently been done, nobody can trust the data because you don't know who's filled it out.
I think we've set out in the response why we take the approach that we take. You know, we're trying to ensure that everyone can have their view. That there's always ways that people can attempt to manipulate consultations. A consultation is one part of the decision-making process. It informs the wider process. There's lots of other things that feed into it, like data and designs and other elements. So it's one part of the process, and you know, any part of the process potentially, you know, people could seek to interfere with it. We do the best that we can to ensure that consultations are free and as fair as possible.
Yeah, but being free, that doesn't mean that anybody in the world can respond to them. Which is
I think we need to accept that we're going to triangulate the data. So we've done an actual opinion polling specifically on the ground in the area. All the local councillors have been out there listening to their ward members. So I think this is another way of bringing in data. It's not an exact or perfect science, but I think we're triangulating all the different data sources. I'm really sorry to say that is the end of the public forum now. I think we've actually gone over the additional time that I've allocated, and we do need to move on to the rest of the meeting. So I'd like to thank everyone who's come and participated today. The thing is, I've got a number of other people before you, Brendan, and we've run out of time. We'll send you an answer on that by email. So are there going to be buses on Boxing Day and New Year's Eve? New Year's Day? Okay, we'll get an answer to you by email, Brendan. Thank you for your question, and thank you to all the members of the public who've come and participated today, and it's been very respectful this time round. Thank you. So let's move on now. So we are now on agenda item 7. So this is to this is part one. This is work package 4 of the A37 A4018 project, which is a 13-mile project to improve the number 2 bus route, and this is work package 4, which is early works funding. This is to seek approval to procure and award contracts for the delivery of pedestrian accessibility measures along the corridor, funded by the WECA early works funding. And I'm going to ask, it's a key decision because it impacts 2 or more wards, although the actual financial threshold hasn't been met. And I'm going to invite Adam to introduce and outline the report.
Hi, thanks. So this is a number of proposed measures as part of the A37 A4018 corridor to improve kind of local walking, cycling facilities in general. We sought to bring these forward quickly ahead of the FPC so that we can deliver change on the ground. The proposals included our drop curbs and tactile paving along Henleys Road to Knoll Lane, traffic calming in Stockwood, including some new improved pedestrian crossings, as that was requested by ward councillors, and active travel improvements on Crow Lane. So there's a number of improvements there. There's an example of what we're proposing to do in the pack there that shows some of the drop curbs and crossing points. It's a low-risk transport scheme that's been classified by WECA, which means we can do these elements before the full business case has been produced. The estimate of cost is within the paper. It's just under £500,000. We are also exploring alternative sources of funding for the project. So there is some Section 106 money in the area, which we may look to utilise if that is deemed beneficial. So essentially we're seeking approval to accept the early works funding or other funding sources, if available, for delivering those elements I've set out before the full business case is approved, and then authorising the Exec Director to procure and award the contracts and invoke any subsequent extensions and variations.
So yes, comments or questions in particular first, and then any comments as well. Nick, then Tim, then Rob.
Okay, a question first, and I'll do comments in a second round. Can you confirm that in paragraph 5, what we're seeking to authorise here is just bullet A, and that bullets B and C are not on the table? They're not part of the recommendations today.
So my understanding it was the so those 3 areas are what meet the objectives. My understanding was it was those 3 elements, but I can check that and come back to you.
When David spoke, earlier, it was very clear. When David spoke earlier, it was very clear. From up there.
Is it going? I'll ask them to move.
When David was speaking, it was really easy to hear him, and they seem to be coming from these things. So that I'm finding it really hard to hear what anyone says at this end, but quite easy to hear everyone at that end. So I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name. Tom. We're all finding it difficult to hear. When the public was speaking, we seem to be getting sound out of these speakers, and we don't seem to be getting it from our microphones. Thank you.
Chair, can I just clarify Nick's question? Paragraph 5, is that page 23? Is that what we're talking about here?
It's page 1 of that topic.
It is, I think it is page 23. This is about drop curbs, tactile paving at side road pavements, Henleys to Knoll Lane.
So I'm just wondering why you think that what it is in the wording that makes you think that A is included but not B and C?
Okay, so the wider scheme area that the package 4 is those 3 bits, yes, and these designs were developed early, so these are the ones that we're bringing forward as the early works.
You need to turn.
So
we're finding it difficult, but Nick, try turning your.
The thing I said was that I could not hear Adam when he told me the answer to the question.
Can you hear me if I'm sitting here like this? Is that better? Okay.
It really isn't working.
Well, the handheld mic works.
Well, so when we had trouble in the summer, we used 2 handheld mics. There is that option, or if Tom has any. We can't hear anything. I'm
going to suggest Adam. Could we try a handheld mic?
If you turn your mics on, I can't hear the issue.
Sorry. Could we try a handheld mic?
And then Tom will see if he can find a solution. If we really can't find a solution, then we'll go to another proposal.
So if you continue using the mic?
Yeah, Tom will assess us.
Okay.
Tom, do you have any advice for councillors about exactly where, and officers, about where to have the mics for the optimum sound?
You have point towards the phone and you turn it on like that.
Okay.
We're just.
So try not to look to the side.
All right. I'll try and be as clear speaking as I can. So work package 4 includes those 3 elements. These are early works as part of work package 4. So yes, we are just delivering the bits in the first bullet point. The other bits would come forward later. It's about I think it's about a £2 million package overall.
Okay, so 5A is in scope. That's the subject of the vote tonight. 5B, 5C, not part of tonight's discussion.
So there's a business case ongoing. That will come back at a later stage. This is early works.
Graham's looking particularly confused by that.
No,
oh, okay. Tim, you had has that answered your question, Nick? That we're just. It seems that we're just doing 5A, 5B, and C will come later. Tim.
Thank you. Yeah, Adam, we've got one diagram here which is illustrative of the kind of changes. They all look good. It all looks like it's helping pedestrians, particularly with road crossings and that kind of thing. Are the others, as this is only an illustration, is this representative of pretty much what the kinds of changes that you're planning to do are across the piece?
So they're representative of that first bullet point, which is the kind of drop curbs, tactile paving, some crossing improvements at mini roundabouts along Henleys Road to Knoll Lane. So that's representative of that first bullet point. The bits in Stockwood are, I think, like zebra crossings rather than uncontrolled crossings. So the second 2 will be different to the first one, but we'll bring those back later.
But we've just established that they're not part of this this vote.
I think the answer is they are absolutely indicative and representative of the sort of thing we'll be doing under 5A, which is what is under discussion today. Nick.
The full set of drawings were issued to us committee councillors on the 14th of November by email, but it's a 15-page document, so I think it could have been published in support of this paper as well.
I think we can, could we publish that document, Sam, post hoc, but at least the, I'm very pleased that the ward councillors have had a chance to see the detailed designs. Rob, your question.
I'm going to speak in a slightly stilted way in the hope that you hear me a bit easier. There's paragraph 12 says we propose to submit an early works funding application to WECA in November 2025. So that's obviously in the past now. Is this something that's already happened, or is this just simply needing an update? Presumably it's just that it's just been put in, meaning something that we're about to do when this was written, but actually it hasn't happened yet.
So we've submitted an early works application.
Okay.
This is about approving, accepting that funding and delivering the works.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Any further questions? Nick, I think you wanted to make some comments.
Yes, so as a ward member for Henleys, I'm obviously happy to receive money to improve pedestrian access. Henleys Road is an important shopping street that struggles for pedestrian access because of the historic concrete block paviours that we've got there that continuously dislodge themselves, causing trip hazards. It's the thing at the Henleys Neighbourhood Forum I get most complaints over is pedestrian access to Henleys High Street area, is the uneven pavement, the tree roots outside the post office that you cannot get over in a mobility aid or with a push chair, the zebra crossings, which we have now repainted, which is great, but we haven't managed to clean the Belisha beacons on them. And also there's an opportunity in our neighbourhood high streets now to, as we have in Clifton and in Cottam, to put out planters and benches and things. So love the idea of spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on public realm and pedestrian accessibility improvements. This isn't the scheme that I was chosen, that I would have chosen myself. Ward councillors weren't consulted on it in advance. In fact, the only reason it exists in this sense right now is because it has been made in the past, shelved by a previous administration, and then pulled out again to be reheated. It's not a result of consultation with local people or members.
Kaz, then Tom.
So no real concerns from me on this one. I welcome the implementation of more improvements to allow disabled people to traverse across my ward. Just a couple of minor points I think I wanted to make. You've got a picture in there of the roundabout at the top of Doncaster Road. So I do feel obliged to say there are lots of issues with car parking around there, and I just wondered if maybe some double yellow lines around that vicinity would actually help to improve the scheme in terms of visibility for residents, and is how that would actually be able to be implemented, probably not within this scheme, I guess, but if there's any sort of TROs being produced, which I believe there are for the Memorial Stadium, for example, perhaps you could just have a quick look at this in the same scheme. I'm not too sure of the process, but I'm just making that comment. I have to say some of the pavements in the vicinity of that area are very, very poor, and people have raised concerns with me about uneven pavements. So we're spending a lot of money on here on these tactile and drop curbs, but I just wanted to make that particular point. And one other thing I want to say was there are instances where we have these drop curbs and tactile pavements where you could end up with lots of puddles because they allow puddles to form. Most of them are okay, but you do get instances, and I just wonder whether you take that into account when you design these schemes. do you actually have a spirit level, or do you look at the local drains? Because this has an impact in terms of, this is good for people with the protected characteristic of disability, but if you are looking at protected characteristic of age, elderly people, and sex and pregnancy and maternity, then it's maybe not so good for them if they need to try and overcome a massive puddle. So just want to get your comments on that particular issue, please.
Yeah, so drainage is considered as part of the design. So whenever we do schemes like this, they are generally designed not to enable puddling. That is reliant on the work being delivered to the design, and sometimes we have to take remedial action. It's also subject to the wear and tear of time. So if vehicles drive up onto drop curbs and things like that, then they can upset the kind of levels as to how everything is set to ensure that it's draining properly. You also get, particularly this time of year, build-ups of materials like leaves and such like that can start to cause puddles that will extend over dropped curbs, but they are all designed to try and avoid that approach. It is dependent on how well it's built, and the passage of time, things will settle and vehicles will drive on pavements and such like, and also create further problems.
I do agree with you that the last thing you want, if you're particularly a wheelchair user, is to be going through deep puddles, deep muddy puddles. So it is something that we really need to make sure the design's right, and then we're maintaining it as well as we can. Thank you. Tom.
Thank you. I want to start off with a question, just 'cause I couldn't immediately see it in the papers. Obviously, all the ward councillors were emailed for feedback. Could you summarise the feedback that was received?
From ward councillors on this scheme? I don't have that to hand, but I can provide that to you afterwards if you like.
Okay. Would have been useful for it to be in the papers, is all I would say. Same with the drawings, just so we have the fuller set of information that we're making a decision on. Obviously, I've seen all the drawings because I was emailed as a ward councillor, but I'm just conscious that the committee members weren't. I think it would have been useful just for a summary section in the reports about what the ward council were broadly supportive. I'm broadly supportive of this for the bits that sort of fall into the Hallfield ward area. And I've sent some feedback in just around the parking issues that are going to need to be addressed more longer term around commuter parking. But yeah.
I think you'll be familiar with the way that these papers get done, and there's a sort of parallel process that's happened here. I think I can assure you that any feedback from ward members will be taken very seriously. So I think, yes, it would have been better to have these in the paperwork, but we haven't got that. I think we can assure you that all the comments will be taken on board, or at least replied to. Any other comments, or shall I move this towards the vote? So on the board, it basically approves the proposal to accept early works funding using either WECA or other sources of funding. Authorise, and then we have all the usual delegations to make that happen. I'm going to propose that. Would someone like to second that? Let's take Kaz. So Kaz has seconded it. Can I ask people to vote, everyone who wants to vote for this proposal, to put their hand up? That's everyone other than Nick. I'm not going to go around everyone's names. Against and abstaining. Nick. Okay, so that's 8 for and 1 abstention. I'm going to suggest...
I was just going to ask if we could possibly have a short break.
I was going to suggest a short break. I'm going to suggest it looks like it's about 18 minutes past, so should we come back at about 25 past? So that's about 7 minutes. Is that okay for everyone? Right. Tom, if you'd like to come back to your seat, then we'll resume the meeting. I am going to say, if you can't hear, then we're going to have to think about what we do about it, because personally, I'm finding it quite hard to hear anyone, in particular Adam. So, and obviously Adam's going to be very important in the next few minutes.
Chair, can I make the suggestion we do use an alternative form of amplification, because we just can't hear what other people are saying with this, unfortunately.
I think it's the speakers, though, not the mic. Tom has made some changes.
It's actually sounding a bit better right now, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Tom.
Should we give it a go and see how it goes?
Thank you.
For those of you watching at home, we're finding the sound. We're the guinea pigs for a brand new system, and I think it's quite lucky that we're testing it today, because full council may benefit from us being the guinea pigs of a new sound system in the chamber. So I'm going to move us on. It's agenda item number 8, which is Streetspace 2, Denmark Street and Rosemary Lane. The purpose of this report is to seek approval to submit a full business case for Denmark Street and Rosemary Lane, to seek and approve and accept and seek approval to accept and spend the funding for these schemes, and to seek approval to award any contracts required to construct the approved schemes. Now, it's come to light that this committee would like to consider these two separately. And we've worked out a sequence of events. So I'm going to ask Adam to introduce this. We'll go through it. What it looks like we're going to do is, because you can't amend an amendment, we're going to take an amendment first potentially to defer Denmark Street. In any case, we will end up discussing both of these schemes separately and making separate decisions, because I'm very aware that that's what the committee wants to do. So we'll ask Adam to introduce this. We'll have our discussions, and then we will have a series of amendments as required. And I'll take you through them logically, because we've worked it all out. So first off, this is a key decision report, but because of two reasons. It both goes over 500,000 and it impacts 2 or more wards. So Adam, if you'd like to introduce the report, and hopefully we can hear you, but do tell me if you're finding that difficult.
Right, thanks. So this report includes 2 schemes, Denmark Street and Rosemary Lane. They have been packaged together. That was a decision that was taken some time ago in conjunction with the combined authority. And as a result of that, we've done one business case for both schemes. It's important to note it's a low-risk transport scheme, so the business case is quite high level. It doesn't require a BCR element as other more expensive or more complicated schemes would. I'll go through each of the different schemes. I'll start with Rosemary Lane. So Rosemary Lane is a point closure. This was first kind of brought up around the time of the pandemic due to significant issues with vehicles travelling at high speed through roads to the south of Robertson Road. So we had a number of incidences of vehicles overturning due to the speeds they were going along some of the side roads that run onto Robertson Road, and that was because they were going to Rosemary Lane to get to Fishponds Road. So we had a lot of requests from residents to do something about that issue, i.e. put in speed humps and such like, but that would just push the problem onto the next road. So a more kind of simple solution was put forward of closing Rosemary Lane. This has the added benefit of benefiting the primary school, because there's quite a significant amount of traffic that is using Rosemary Lane to cut through essentially from south of Easton up to Fishponds Road. The alternative route is via the Rosemary Lane at the Robertson Road, junction with Stapleton Road. That junction doesn't have any congestion issues. I know a number of the objections that have been put forward cite congestion, but there aren't any congestion problems at that junction. I actually went down there last night just to check what I thought was the case, having designed it sort of 15 years ago and monitored it for many years after. There aren't significant issues there, which is why we feel that is a very viable alternative route and a much more suitable route for that volume of traffic. So the scheme, as I say, proposes to close the road. The consultation was done, and it's fair to say that the consultation responses were more against the scheme than for it. So the wider consultation, I think, was around 63% against. I've got the exact figure. There was then some analysis done of more local responses, those in East and Eastville wards, which was 55-45 in terms of against and for the scheme. I think it's important to note that a consultation is one part of the evidence that we would use when making a decision like this. The closure of Rosemary Lane meets an awful lot of our objectives in terms of promoting sustainable transport, reducing car trips outside schools, improving green spaces, etc. The alternative routes are felt to be perfectly viable. And yes, there is a degree of opposition. However, I think the number of responses to the consultation was around 300. We sent out 3,000 letters to get views on this. So that is a sample of people's views on the project, and it's something that we need to take consideration of. Having done that, the officer view is that we should still proceed with the scheme and take forward the closure. The cost of the scheme is estimated at £547,000. The other element of the scheme is Denmark Street. So the consultation for Denmark Street looked at a number of options, a smaller scheme, a bigger scheme, and part-time closures and full-time closures. Following the completion of that engagement and discussions with stakeholders, there was a very clear favourite to go with a full closure on the larger space. So due to that, we are amending the designs, which is why there aren't detailed designs provided in the pack. The cost of the scheme is around 752,000 is the estimate. We have had some concerns raised by disability groups, and we are doing further work, including a Wessel audit of the area to try and deal with those concerns that are being raised as part of finalising that kind of full closure design. So in terms of the schemes and I guess the processes to where we've got to, when we started the process, I would say WECA's position was maybe more fixed in terms of how to assess these schemes. I think they're more flexible now. They've introduced different processes since we started the scheme. So there's as well as a low-risk transport scheme, there's another even kind of lower level assessment process that they've introduced. So as it stands, it's packaged as one. If there is a decision to split it, that's something we can do that will introduce some delay in terms of the business case process. I would say on a scheme like this, the business case is quite high level because I think the changes proposed meet all relevant national, local, regional policy requirements. Certainly from our officer recommendation would be that the business case demonstrates the case for the schemes. I do accept, however, that the design for Denmark Street is not there and committee may not feel comfortable approving a scheme that doesn't have a detailed design associated with it. In terms of the recommendations, the recommendations are to submit the full business case and then to procure and award contracts to deliver the schemes. Now, I understand there are discussions around delaying decisions on particularly the Denmark Street element. I guess my recommendation to committee would be that the business case wouldn't change significantly depending on what the final design looks like. If there is a desire to delay making a decision on the design of Denmark Street, I would advise that doesn't necessarily mean you need to delay submission of the FBC to WECA, but that design could come back to committee for approval subsequent when that design is finalised if the committee wanted to take that approach. Yeah. So submitting the FBC does not commit us to delivering the scheme. It just says we've submitted that to WECA, they've assessed it, and you've then got the option to deliver the scheme. So I guess the point I'm making to some extent, and in some cases more than others, the business case is a formal process that we have to follow to tick a box to some extent. In this case, I would say that the business case is probably less important than the detail of the design of the scheme. And in order for you to be able to make decisions at pace, we would recommend submit the FBC. And if you want to delay decision on the actual design itself, then we could take that forward as a separate decision and bring the design back when it's ready for committee to sign it off and decide whether you want to go forward with it or not.
This is a really important point, so I just want to pause and make sure everyone understands that we can submit the full business case to WECA so we stay on our timelines, but we can we're not then obliged to take it forward if we don't like the design, and the design can come back to committee. So I think that's a fair summary of what you've said.
Yeah, I think you would just need to amend recommendation 2 to highlight the fact that the Denmark Street design needs to return to committee before being approved.
As things stand, I think we're going to debate these two schemes separately, because I think there's a very clear will of the committee to do that. Tim?
Can I just confirm then that the FBC wouldn't contain the detailed design that is currently missing that we're saying we'd like to see?
It will go in there. We've still got a bit to do with the FBC before we submit it to WECA. What we're asking committee for is approval to send it to WECA when it's ready. There's lots of timescales associated with all these projects that have lots of lead-in dates. As I see it, the key decision here for committee is whether you're happy with the design or not, and the principle of the design. There's the principle of design and the design itself. The design itself is not there yet, clearly. The FBC is high level saying these are the reasons for doing this sort of scheme. Submitting that to WECA is part of the process we have to go through to secure the funding. That doesn't mean that we have to spend the money or deliver the scheme. I'm just trying to set out a process, I suppose, that would enable us to move the scheme forward at pace if committee wants that to happen, but still gives committee the opportunity to not take forward the scheme if they don't want to.
And should we make tweaks or change the design, then we can put that in as a change request once the full business case has been accepted, and that's a fairly light touch and fairly rapid approach. So what this does is gives us control over the design, but still keeps us on the timelines.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just struggling with... So WECA would approve a design which we may then change, and then we would have to submit something else. So what's the advantage to that as opposed to just bringing the full design back here for approval and then going to WECA?
So the design will go in the business case to WECA. There's a process we have to go through. They then take a bit of time to and fro with us saying, what about this, what about that? Because that process can take a bit of time. But we will bring the detailed design back to committee when it's ready either way. If we submit the business case, or we get approval to submit the business case, it means we're not delayed on Rosemary Lane. For the business
we're going to be debating these separately. So, Emma, then Tom.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I get what you're saying about how it can come back, but it wouldn't slow up. You did mention about an audit with Wessel. So, because when I was looking at it, I like it in principle a lot, but was a concern in the design about the lack of disabled parking bays. I also saw there were some recommendations from the Hippodrome, I think, of where they might be able to go. So I think that sounds like something that would feed into where those disabled bays would go. So could that just sort of come back? Would that happen afterwards? Would that happen at the same time?
So that will be happening as part of developing the final design. So yeah, that will be incorporated into the design before we bring it back to committee for approval.
So there doesn't need to be a delay for that bit to happen?
No.
Brilliant, thank you.
Tom.
How much longer do you need for the detailed design work to be completed?
I'd have to check with the team exactly how long they think. I know the designs are being worked on at the moment. We will advise which committee we think would come back to. I would imagine it will be probably February, March time.
Okay, can you take us through the cost breakdowns of the schemes? Because they're not in the document.
So the high-level costs for the schemes are in the document. Obviously, with Denmark Street not having a detailed design yet, there isn't a cost breakdown. There's an estimated cost. So the estimated cost comes from a generally from a metre square approach, where we look at the amount of space and the type of scheme we're doing, and that gives us a high-level cost estimate that's based on lots of schemes that we've done over a period of time. When the detailed design is finalised, we'll get a more detailed cost estimate.
Councillor Patton, I'd say I'm deeply uncomfortable making a decision on something where we've not got the full information, haven't got the financial information, we haven't got the detailed designs. I just don't think that supports principles of good decision making. I'm really deeply uncomfortable with it going forward. I think it just needs to come back in a couple of months when it's fully ready, and then we just make the decision then. That's the right way to do things.
Well, you could propose that as an amendment. I was going to work. Nick has indicated his desire to propose an amendment. I don't know if we've got enough information now to move to me moving this and then accepting amendments. But is there anything else you want to say first, Nick?
Well, you're right. I did 2 days ago indicate that I would seek an amendment to defer the Denmark Street element. And the reason that we put in amendments ahead of time is so that officers can check them and finesse them. And it sounds like our officers do have views about how this could best work. So I wonder if there is now a return motion of officers, having spent 2 days looking at my idea, have got something in writing that they think is suitable to vote on tonight.
The amendment that I think we would be looking at is that we continue to submit the full business case to WECA. We bring back the designs to this committee. That will be associated with full costs. And if we want to make changes to those designs, then that will, it's a very light touch process then to change that with WECA as part of a toing and froing of the full business case. If we delay the full business case, then the whole thing will take a lot longer.
So I provided my motion in writing 2 days beforehand. Is that in writing anywhere?
So we haven't actually got in writing something we can put on the board. So we just need to adjourn very quickly to decide what that amendment is going to be.
Chair, do we know if Councillor Morris is coming back, or is he?
He's not coming back. No.
That seems a sensible approach.
Let's
the motion on the table is simply to defer, and if our officers are advising that there's a more effective way, then let's see that and let's scrutinise it.
We've got an amendment from in writing from Councillor Rippington, but unfortunately that wouldn't allow us to defer one scheme and approve or reject the other scheme, because you can't amend an amendment. So that's why we want to take an amendment to defer the Denmark Street design until the next or one or two meetings hence, and then we can take Councillor Rippington's amendment just to discuss Rosemary Lane. Tim.
Yeah, I appreciate this is complicated, but I'd like to ask Councillor Coombs if he would be open to an amendment which says defer this until the full business case can be brought back with design and costs, which is similar to your amendment, but...
Well, I think it is implied in my standing amendment, which was to defer the entire lot, but that also includes the business case. So that is the position that we're starting from, because that's the amendment that has been tabled. So yes, that's my starting position. However, if there's alternative wording that still secures the committee's ability to withdraw the scheme if the plans and the costs aren't to our standards, then I think that it would be reasonable.
I personally would like to try and get this away to WECA, because I think in the process of actually finalising and agreeing that full business case, it's going to take quite some time anyway. So throwing the design into a new design into the mix is not going to upset that process, but it not making any decisions today will delay this by some time. So I'm going to suggest we have a quick adjournment and we agree an amendment that either Nick or I can put in. I don't think I can amend my own thing, can I? So I think it's got to come from the floor.
It's not been moved yet, but
no.
we'll write something.
Should we do that? Should we just adjourn very quickly now and prepare an amendment which tries to capture what Nick does and what I hear this commit? If I could just, we're going to adjourn, so I'm just going to say that what I'm absolutely determined to do is consider these two schemes separately, which is, I think, the overriding concern of this committee.
Can I just ask a question on that, though? Because wasn't this discussed at agenda briefing about separating them?
It was, and I'm sorry that it didn't happen, and I've learnt a lesson from that. Officers came back and said, well, as far as Bristol City Council and WECA are concerned, this is a single package, so it should be voted as a single package. And I took that, and I think I should have, the agenda conference, I should have pushed through much more robustly what we decided at agenda conference. That's my mistake, and I apologise for it.
Okay. This is
as a result of that, we now have a difficult we have a logical path to do what the agenda conference asked to do. Tim.
Sorry, I know I'm prolonging this conversation, but I'm just trying to understand why it would save us a lot of time to submit the business case ahead of it coming back, ahead of the designs coming back to committee, when the business case is not yet ready. So it's going to take some time to finalise the business case anyway. Could it then not just come back to the first available committee for us to sign and then go to WECA? That would seem to be the logical way to do it. I don't see it saving huge amounts of time by agreeing to submit the business case in advance of the committee seeing the design.
I am going to ask Adam, because we've seen quite some delays, significant delays once things... One of my frustrations is that we agree many months ago a programme with WECA, that we will do this and in order that we can get onto site at a certain time. Unfortunately, although it has milestones, WECA have not been helping us fulfil those milestones. Now, you would have thought, once they agreed those milestones, that they would stick by those milestones, but that's not been the case. So my frustration is this could lead us to some delay because we're not getting that timely decision-making from WECA.
I mean, the problem, though, is we don't have the information we need to make a decision today, so it's a poor decision, and we would look to potentially call it in if you try and push this through today. This is not the way to be doing decision-making at this council. We should have the full information and then be making a decision on that basis. We don't have the finance information. We don't have the full designs. This is just really poor. I have to say that.
So the business case, as I said, covers both schemes. Rosemary Lane scheme is designed up. The business case is high level because it's a relatively small amount of money in the general scheme of things. The processes that we have to go through with the combined authority and committee are quite long in terms of getting things in the process. So by giving permission to submit the FBC when it's completed, in consultation with the chair, who is the chair of committee, and the exec director of growth and regeneration, just gives us more flexibility in terms of submitting that full business case when it's ready to go. And within that full business case, the earlier developed designs can be submitted as part of that to speed up that process. And what we're committing to is bringing back the detailed design for committee, including the costings at that stage for committee to approve or not, however they choose to. And I can provide wording to that effect.
I think we're going to go and work up the wording of an amendment so we can put it on the screen. I wonder if you would like us to prepare two amendments. One, which is what Nick's been saying, which is to... sorry? That one's already prepared. One which is to defer the Denmark Street scheme only, and one which I think Tom is asking for, which is to defer the whole lot.
We're just talking about Denmark Street. I do think the whole paper needs to go back and then come back, but I think we'll just deal with Councillor Coon's amendment, then whatever wording comes.
All right, let's get the wording right now and
get on with it. About this.
Right, so where I've got to is that I don't think this is satisfactory, and I think I haven't yet moved any of the recommendations, so I'm not going to do that, and I'm going to ask for a clear report to come back. If you want to then, I think, as per the agenda conference, we will separate them into two separate decisions, albeit that it's administratively for WECA and City Council officers, this is one decision. For us, it's two decisions. So I'm going to make sure that it comes back with two very clear decisions, and I'm hoping that by the time it comes, I'm hoping we can bring it back to the February meeting and that we will have a proper design to look at by then. And if not a full construction design, the kind of outline design that will then be taken forward to full procurement design. So as we haven't moved anything, there's nothing to vote on, and I think we move on to the next agenda item. Right, where are we now? Agenda item 9. So, sorry? We're still in Bristol. We're still... I think that's by the time we've tried to exhaust all the possibilities, the only thing we can do is listen to the committee. The committee aren't very happy. They want it to be two decisions. And so I'm going to we haven't moved anything. We're just going to attempt to get a move on with the designs and bring this back as soon as we possibly can. Can I ask just a little, it's not a vote, but if we were to bring this back in February to the next committee and we were to say something along the lines of have two separate decisions, including, and it didn't have a full design, then no, forget all that. No, forget all that. We're going to bring a proper paper that we can make a decision on at the next available committee. And I apologise for all the confusion. And let's move on to agenda item 9, which is this is a key decision because it's over £500,000. It's this is Temple Way, isn't it? So this is a budget allocation for Temple Way, and I'm going to ask Adam to present the report.
So this is a report to increase the total funding allocation for the Temple Way project to 4.944 million, and to note the approach to meet the shortfall through a programme change request to WECA. So a tender was set out in August 2025. The tenders came back higher than the available funding. We looked at a variety of options to reduce the cost of the project, and that reduced the impact of that down to 826k in terms of the excess required. We submitted a change request to WECA for the additional funding, but that's been wrapped up into the wider change request for the CRSTS programme. To enable us to proceed with the contract, because it was at the end of the highways framework, we allocated existing approved funding from the Clean Air Zone to ensure that we could award the contract. We're now looking at the wider change request for the programme to WECA and allocating funding across all the projects. And we will allocate CRSTS funding to cover the increased costs so that CAS funding is retained to be spent at the end of the programme. So we're not reliant on CAS funding to enable this project. So the costs are shown in the paper at point 8 with an increase of 826k. The BCR prior to this change was 2.91, so the increase in costs will not have a significant impact on that and won't take it below 2. We've got an image there of what the scheme delivers. So the recommendation is to increase the total funding allocation to 4.94 million. And authorise the Executive Director of Growth and Regeneration to take all steps required to spend the funding and to note the proposed approach to meet the shortfall through a programme change request to WECA, which we'll be submitting shortly.
Do you want to just say something about the wider picture around the CRSTS allocation and decisions made at the last WECA committee as well?
So the transport, the WECA committee allocated the CRSTS funding. That resulted in a reduction in available funding for the programme. We've been working on the BCC programme to look at what elements we need to remove or what additional funding might be available, and we're turning that into a change request to submit to WECA, which will set out the revised programme that we propose to deliver.
And that's the programme of 5 projects in the city centre, the number 2, everything that's been funded. The whole CRSTS programme has had about a 10 or more % cut from WECA. Yeah. So we need to re-baseline the entire programme, but we need to get on with this one. So that's what this is effectively doing. It's getting on with that whilst we re-baseline the rest of the programme.
And we will bring a paper back to committee in March to set out what those changes will be. And this particularly helps us sequence those programmes so that this one we can get away in advance of the others. So, would anyone... Yes, Nick and Tim, would you like to...
Thanks. So the Bristol Post have done one of those pieces where they take the views of commenters and put them into the article, and they say, here we go again, put the work out to independent tender and take the best. That's the one that they put highest in their report. That's exactly what's happened, though, isn't it? We've put the work out to independent tender, and it wasn't within the budget that was initially approved. I've got a lot of sympathy here. This happens to me at work more often than it should do. I get a board approval for a project. You get the tenders, they're higher than expected. You go back to the board. It's uncomfortable, but it's normal, and so I think that the officer team have done everything that they should do here in de-scoping as best they can and revisiting the risk pot, and now we just have to get more money from the funders. So that's unfortunate, but that's how it works in projects like this, so well done.
Thanks, Nick. Tim?
Yeah, thanks. I just want to get my head around the sequencing of this a bit. So we tendered for the project and it came back the highest, the best tender came back much higher than we had approved the budget when we passed this committee. So we're 825k short after remedial action that you've taken. We have then, the chair and the executive director have then approved 825k from CAS funding to enable you to go out to appoint a contractor, and we've now appointed a contractor. Is that decision, being 825k, is that not a decision that should have come to committee? I understand it's now coming to committee, but we have already appointed the contractors, and therefore we can't really reverse that decision. So I note that the paper says to note that the money has been used and to seek approval for the increase in funding, but we've already gone out and appointed a contractor. So what would happen at this point if we were to not approve the increase in funding? Would that, would we get sued by the contractors? Or I just don't quite understand how this has happened in that sequence.
So the funding, the CAS funding, was already approved at January Cabinet in 2024 for use on the CRSTS programme. So we took legal advice on that, and they said yes, that is legitimate funding to use to fund the project. So should committee not approve this recommendation, essentially that funding was pre-approved, but we felt it was necessary to come back to committee to say there's been an increase in costs. We want to just seek approval to spend that additional money on the project. We're nowhere near committing that amount of money at the moment because there is a healthy contingency as well as various other contracts still to be let in terms of the signals that come at the end and landscaping and that sort of thing. So we are still within the original approval in terms of letting the civils contract, but obviously the scheme has a higher cost overall. As I say, that funding, that CAS funding was there already to deliver the CRSTS programme, which is why we use that to prevent having to re-tender, because we're at the end of the existing or the previous framework. So if we had have delayed further, we wouldn't have been able to use that framework, and we would have had to re-tender the works, which would have led to increased costs for the council, and also would have pushed those works further into the programme, which would have then impacted on other works that were planned to come forward across the city. So yeah, we sought to find a way, if you like, to ensure that we can deliver that programme, given it's a £180 million programme, and we're prioritising the schemes that are in place and ready to go, without causing those delays that would cause extra cost and extra impacts across the city's traffic network.
So, thanks, Adam. So I understand, why we need to get it done. What I'm trying to understand is if we were to not approve this, which is a possibility within this committee because it's a democratic committee, you would have to then find £826,000 worth of savings in this scheme. I appreciate you say we haven't contracted up to that level yet, but we think the scheme is going to, so you'd effectively have to say we'll deliver the same scheme for £826,000 less because the committee hasn't approved the increase in budget?
If necessary, we could do that, yeah.
Okay, it just seems an odd way to have done it. I would have expected to get the approval to increase the budget before going ahead with the scheme, but...
Well, I would say it's not unusual that we come back to committee in the middle of a scheme asking for additional funding. We had one recently with Old City King Street where we came back to ask for additional funding to complete the scheme when we're already in contract because we're in the middle of delivering it and you get compensation events that the costs increase. And, we have obviously a lot of projects coming forward. We need a degree of flexibility around that to ensure we get best value for the council and for taxpayers. And if we start introducing significant delays in the middle of contracts, that will cost us significant amounts of money.
I think there's another point here. I think I'm right in saying this, and I'm now asking a question of Adam, which is if we approve this, it gives you more flexibility in putting the different pots together. Is that correct?
It's more about the flexibility in terms of the delivery on street. So getting this scheme done and delivered earlier so it's not as impactful when other projects are coming forward in the city centre area.
Yeah, so I understand if we're a year into a project and we discover new things that have to be done and we have to fund it, you come back and ask for more money. But in this case, it was only in September that the contracts were kind of issued after the tenders came back in August. So it just seems that this maybe is something that should have come for approval before we moved forward.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask a question of clarification about what's in scope and what's out of scope for this project? I can remember a crossing of Temple Way from Avon Street to Cheese Lane being discussed at various meetings. Is that in scope for this project, or is that being funded or delivered with some other money, please?
That's in this project, yeah. That's in this project, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there were several things in this scheme that I quite liked, and I think it was quite a good one. But I am concerned that we're seeing this increase in cost, not for a reason. It's been kind of indicated that there's been a problem found on site. So I'm now questioning the sort of process that happens in Bristol City Council. And I sort of look back at previous papers, and there was an ACOM cost of £4.6 million. Then BCC made it £4.4 million. The numbers sort of seem to be all over the place. So I have concerns about the process that's actually happening in the council, and I'd like you to maybe just address that point. I also noticed you mentioned the business cost ratio of 2.91, now not an issue, but when I look back at a previous paper, I thought it was actually much higher than that. So maybe this is just me, but in March 2025, it was talking about a BCR of 6.22. Obviously, that's more than over the threshold. So I'm trying to understand what is the actual BCR. Am I looking at the wrong one, or is your 2.91 the one I should have been looking at?
So the agreed BCR is 2.91. The change was due to how some of the funding was assessed. So quite a lot of the funding on this project is Section 106 funding. And I think my understanding of the discussions with the Combined Authority was that they wanted to, include that funding, which increases the cost, which then reduces the benefit cost ratio. So it's a technical point about whether you include certain costs in the cost of a scheme. The BCR at the moment is 2.91. If you add on 800k of costs, which is less than a 20% increase, it will not take that BCR below 2. The Combined Authority have approved schemes with BCRs of below 1.5 as part of the CRSTS programme. So what we're saying is we don't see any benefit in going back and reassessing the BCR, that the benefits case stands up. In terms of the costings, between getting approval, there were various things that changed. So there were some additions through the quality audit process that added some additional costs. We also brought in a process to better assess the traffic management impacts, and included in the tendering process more scoring of the quality of managing the traffic and managing the construction of the project, which further increased the cost to some extent. And then there was inflation as well, because this was based on the earlier framework, and the inflation was underestimated, and that's what led to the increase in costs.
Just coming back on the BCR, so the actual number we saw back in March of 6.22 was correct in that paper. You now said it's 2.91 and maybe going to change a little bit more. I'm just really confused that these BCRs are meaningless.
So I do remember highlighting at that committee that the Combined Authority had questioned the score that was presented there. It was part of an iterative process with them. It's about how you assess the funding as to whether it should count towards the costs or not. Some costs do and some costs don't.
You've touched on the Clean Air Zone funding bit. Could you just, I obviously can't remember all the way back to January Cabinet, so a couple of years ago, could you just explain sort of what exactly it was allocated for in the CRSTS, and the basis of why you felt able to use that?
So there was £10 million of funding allocated at January Cabinet for delivery of the CRSTS programme.
It was that broad. That was the wording.
Yeah, match funding to CRSTS programme.
So, and the CRSTS programme required a certain level of match funding, so that's why it was committed. What this is doing is giving us the what this is effectively doing is change. We've been able to use CAS funding to get the contract in place to save us a lot of money, because the new contract is going to be different. Okay, the new framework contract. So what this is doing is we've made that decision, and that was within the gift of the Executive Director to do so under the delegated authority from January. What we're now doing is funding this from CRSTS, because the rebaselining we have to do means that we want to be able to have that flexibility to use CAS funding for other projects, which means that we can actually spend that after this CRSTS programme is finished. So what we've done is we've managed to get the contract across the line using CAS, but we're now switching the CAS out for CRSTS funding, because the CAS funding is a lot more flexible. So actually, I think what Nick has said is that we've done an extremely good job of containing the costs, both by bringing them down and by not putting them through a whole other tender, which is already more expensive, because we're using an old framework which had better and more favourable rates. What this now does is gives us much more flexibility to rebaseline our whole programme, given we've had a £20 to £30 million cut out of a £200 million programme from WECA. And this then gives us a lot more flexibility to bring forward a set of proposals to March by making sure it's the grant funding, and actually it helps WECA to get their grant, as much of their grant funding away by March 2027 as possible. So really we've done the right thing by approving the contract, but coming back to make sure we've got flexibility to rebaseline the programme. I think that's probably the best way of describing it, isn't it? Adam?
No, sorry, I was just...
So I think that's answering the questions you were trying to... hopefully that's answered Tim's questions.
The CAS funding will still be used for CRSTS things. Once you got it back, it's not like it's available then for...
No, it will be used for CRSTS, but given we've had such a big, at least a 10% cut in our overall allocation for CRSTS, it's better to have as much of the flexible things that are in our gift and push as much of the current spend and rapid spend that we have to get away to CRSTS. So that's what this is basically doing. It's basically saying this is something we want to do. We're then putting it into CRSTS in order that we can free up funding to do other things further down the CRSTS programme.
Fine. And on the proviso that WECA sign off this revised business case, the Clean Air Zone money will come back, but if they don't, you'll still be using this Clean Air Zone money on this project.
So this won't be going back to, the Temple Way won't need to go back to WECA, they've approved the business case.
Oh, so it's been approved that you're not going to need to use the Clean Air Zone money?
No, so the business case has been approved. That doesn't need to be reapproved by WECA. We're submitting to them a programme-wide change request for the whole programme to reset funding levels across all the projects.
Yeah, sure, I guess. Sure, I think what I'm trying to understand is if that isn't agreed, are you still using Clean Air Zone money on this project?
If we need to, yeah.
If you need to, yeah, fine. So I've got one more question then. Because I've just gone back through the Officer Executive Decision and also back to the 20th of March papers. The bit I'm just struggling to get my head around is actually why this didn't come back to committee, because the wording looks really, really clear here, that the delegation that was awarded was up to the maximum budget envelope identified in the report, which is not the figure that's been approved, that's higher, right?
Because we had the existing delegation to use the CAS funding for this, therefore that was within the gift of the Executive Director to do that. And you can look at the, if you want to look at the Officer Decision notice that's been published, and we did seek legal advice on that.
No, I completely understand the question, yeah. We did seek legal advice about the ability to use the pre-existing approved Clean Air Zone funding towards this, and they said that we could under the delegation from that original report.
So I'm just going to read this. I authorise the Executive Director for Growth and Regeneration in consultation with Chair of the Transport and Connectivity Committee to take all steps required to procure and award necessary contracts for this project, which may be over the key decision threshold, in line with the procurement routes and maximum budget envelopes outlined in this report. Should the FPC be approved by the committee, you only had authority to award up to that maximum budget envelope for that report, so you've gone beyond your powers in my view. But yeah.
Okay, well, that's why we sought advice at the time, and obviously what we're talking about is the previous Clean Air Zone report, which had already allocated that funding to CRSTS. So I do understand the point, but that is specifically what we checked to make sure we're acting within powers.
Yeah, but your delegation was only for the 4.1 for the project anyway. So all I'm saying is, like, this is the second paper we're discussing in detail tonight, and this is the second one where I'm concerned about governance. I think outside of this meeting, I'd like a chat with to understand kind of what's going on, because there's clear governance issues in quite a few things here. It's messy. This isn't how we should be doing things, in my view. And I know Green colleagues are now laughing, but, you know, governance is important. Good decision making is important, and we do need to do these things properly. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
In which case, has anyone else got any comments or questions, or should we move to a vote? Okay, so I move the report recommendations that we approve an increase in the total funding allocation to 4.944323, 4 million, those numbers, and all the usual delegations. So I'd like to see people raise that. Would someone like to second that? Rob. And who would like to approve that, agree that? Carried unanimously. Okay. Let's move on. Agenda item 10, active travel network upgrades. The purpose of this report is to provide an overview of plans for managing and improving the existing active travel network across the city, including an audit and review of existing assets and delivery of a citywide programme of minor improvements. And this is to accept and allocate the associated funding requirements, 1.4 million, to undertake the audit work and implement a programme of improvements from previously allocated SIL funding following approval from full council in 22-23. This is a key decision report because it's over 500,000 and by definition it's going to be all over the city. So Adam, would you like to introduce this report?
Yep, sure. So this is essentially a project that is going to identify and map out and then seek to fill some of the gaps in our strategic cycle network and walking network. So you know, we've got a number of schemes through committee that deliver strategic pieces of infrastructure, strategic elements of schemes, and then we have routes that kind of knit together those bits of infrastructure. And there's often small bits along those routes that would benefit from an intervention, whether that be cycle parking, a drop curb, any scooter bay, etc. And they tend to, we don't tend to get funding for those. So we're using the 1.4 million of strategic SIL funding to do effectively an audit of all of our key routes, and then look at what we would seek to do to upgrade those routes, to join those gaps up and to provide those extra facilities where needed. So the work will carry out that report and then come back with a series of recommendations as to what to spend the funding on. And obviously we'll make that report available when it's completed, and that can then also enable us to bid for future funding to fill further gaps, because obviously this funding will only go so far. So the recommendations are to approve the identification and allocation of 1.4 million for this purpose, so for the active travel network audit and improvements from the previously allocated SIL funding following the 2022-23 full council approved capital budget amendment, and authorise the Executive Director of Growth and Regeneration in consultation with the Chair to take all steps required to spend the funding, including procuring and awarding contracts over the key decision threshold, and authorise the Executive Director in discussion with the Chair to adjust amounts within the overall budget envelope.
Thanks, Joe. I just wanted to ask about cycle parking. I am probably a broken record on this because I've mentioned it before in this committee, I think. Just wonder whether, when we look at where cycle parking goes, and it's you know, obviously to fill gaps where we haven't got good cycle parking, particularly high streets, obviously places where people visit, just whether we can involve the ward councillors and make sure that they have some level of oversight on this.
Yep, sure. We'll be liaising with people as we develop the proposal. So.
I've made it absolutely clear to officers that whatever we do through this committee, I want ward councillors to know first from within the council what's going on, and make sure that they're involved in advising and assisting us deliver this sort of programme. I do not want any ward councillors hearing first from external sources something that's going on in their ward.
Thank you. So, because I saw Concord Way on there, this made me think of this as well. In terms of also, maintaining cycle lanes, what provision is there for doing not just routine maintenance, but we often get reports of things like where cycle lanes have become quite overgrown and things haven't been cut back, and so where was somewhere was a lovely compliant cycle lane has then become difficult, and obviously ward councillors can put those in, but I just wonder if there is any funding available for that.
That would be covered by the usual maintenance funding allocations. We can't really use strategic SIL or capital money to do what are revenue activities in essence.
Yeah.
I think, you know, there are cases where you might identify that the asset needs an upgrade. So I know, for example, on Concord Way through Riverside Park, some sections were removed and replaced with tarmac because they're very bumpy. So that's the sort of thing you could fund through this, but pruning back vegetation, probably not. Because that's not improving the asset, if you like. It's a revenue activity.
Right. Okay. So resurfacing can, but if it's just sort of got to okay, lovely. All right. Thank you.
So first of all, I want to say this is another paper where we've been asked to make a decision to spend a large sum of money without having Appendix A, the detail, the essential background detail on the proposal. That's just a comment. I want to make a point. Ed, you went to the Health and Transport meeting with Chris Whitty, and you may remember some of the slides there. And one of the slides asked the question, how can we encourage people to walk more? And the response, with 74% most favoured response, was well-maintained pavements, even, clean, uncluttered and well-lit. So we've got £1.4 million allocated to active travel, and you talk about cycle wayfinding, cycle networks, cycle parking and cycle hangers. In the corporate strategy mentioned on page 289, it says tackle health inequalities to help people stay healthier, given the difference between life expectancy for the most deprived and most prosperous wards remains stubbornly large. So I want to know, will you make sure that deprivation is weighted heavily in deciding where to invest active travel improvements? And will you make sure that good walking infrastructure is very much part of that?
I think that's a fair ask, yes. I think on the point about well-maintained pavements, what Adam said a few minutes ago was that we can't use this funding for maintenance. So we have an ongoing programme which is called Slurry Seal, is it? Which is the way we maintain the tarmacked pavements. So, and that's actually quite a sophisticated programme which uses life cycle modelling and makes sure that we're maintaining those pavements. We can't use this funding for maintenance, so it needs to be for upgrades. I think it's absolutely fair challenge that we should be investing this with a weighting for deprivation.
Yeah, I guess just to follow up, even pavements, well lit, uncluttered. I appreciate the argument for the slurry seal process, and that's been conveyed to me. But I just feel we need to perhaps do a little bit more on pavements, because people will complain about the slurry seal, and I've actually had people in my ward say that there's still dips and they want to use their disability scooters, they can fall over these uneven pavements, and Sudbury ward is one of the most deprived wards in the city. We want to get people out walking to change this 10-year life expectancy discrepancy between Southmead and Westbourne Trim, which is right next door.
Just a very quick one, just to add on, it does say in the paper that the money can be used to identify locations on the network in poor condition for highways. So I guess in terms of Kaz's point about pavements, we can use not just to identify cycle paths that are in poor condition, but also where paving needs to be improved and walking access improved.
Especially where that's an upgrade, because that's what we need to provide through SIL is an upgrade.
Yeah, we can also highlight those areas to the maintenance team as well.
Nick.
Thanks. I'll briefly continue the tangent about maintenance, accepting that we can't use SIL for that, but I think we do have the opportunity with the new city regional transport settlement that we can up the share of funding that we accept that goes to maintenance, and given what we've heard about poorly maintained pavements, cycle paths and highways, I suggest should be looking at spending more on maintenance at the next cycle.
I think we are concerned that at the moment the way that WECA is looking at the TCR funding, which is the new CRSTS, they have allocated all the routine maintenance to routine maintenance, but there's an element in there of challenge funding, which was where you do larger maintenance projects, and that, as things stand, has not been allocated to maintenance. And I think given we're about to go and start talking about corporate risks, so we will be making the case very strongly that the challenge funding that's embedded in TCR should be used for maintenance rather than purely on a wish list of new things. And I think it's of some concern to us that that challenge funding that we had a very strong record of every year going and getting it from DFT was put into TCR and is not being shown in those figures for maintenance at the moment. So I agree with you there. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Adam.
It's just that the base maintenance allocation is determined by government, and that comes part of TCR. And then, yeah, we will be seeking a challenge fund pot on top of that for more like larger maintenance projects, if you like. And frankly, we're probably, even then, probably going to have to go to central government with a really good case for the new cut walls, because that's probably beyond of all of us at the moment. I sense we're ready to take a vote on this, so I'm going to move the recommendations of the report. Would someone like to second that? David? And can I have a show of hands in favour of doing this? That's carried unanimously. Let's move on. I think this is our last one, isn't it? The last thing on, thankfully. So agenda item 11, the corporate risk report. Reports an update on current significant strategic risks relevant to the Transport Connectivity Committee and summarises progress in managing them. It's a non-key decision update report for noting. So the recommendation is that we note the report. I don't know if you wanted to say anything by way of introduction to this, Alex.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the Q2 corporate risk report. So of course we're not in Q2. Things have moved on since, and there'll be future rounds. So the two main risks. So CRR 43 around the delivery of CRSTS by March 27. Of course, the context has now changed around the deadline, and we're working to as has been discussed, actually working to agree a new programme with the combined authority about our actual programme of delivery through a rebaselining exercise following the October report at WECA committee that provided a revised budget allocation to Bristol. So we're working to de-escalate this risk effectively and appraising it around the delivery of the programme to a later date, and this, you'll see this in a future report. The second risk, which is CR55, as you can see on the screen with the glaring downward-facing red arrow, has deteriorated since it was last reported and now has a score of 28. So since this was last at 21, which is already very, very high, there's been further risk understood around the condition of pieces of infrastructure in the city, such as further failures on the new cut walls and the understood condition of Perrot's Bridge, for example, as well as other pieces of infrastructure in the city. Just to say, I'll draw your attention to paragraph 14, where there's a reference about a new direction, effectively, around risk management in the council, which is what the risk team are calling around enterprise risk management, and you'll see that it's been working through with our housing colleagues, where of course there's a number of understood risks in association with the management of the estate there. That's now being taken forward elsewhere, and is being the highways team are working with the risk team in respect of this particular risk, and so we'll start to see more detail come through. You'll start to see that here. So what effectively, as I understand it, you'll see the more introduction of sub-risks to this main risk, and generally our approach to risk management under an enterprise approach, you'll see more of a thematic approach. So this sort of risk, for example, could be reported in respect of a wider risk of infrastructure failure or something like that, and that makes it much more effective of ensuring that dependencies or sort of contextual consequences are neither missed or potentially almost double counted, so you have a much more vertical integration of the detail of the risks. Just in relation to the sort of sub-risks that are being identified but aren't reported in Q2, this sort of thing would be the risk of underfunding to our carriageway life cycle our structures life cycle and our traffic signals. And of course, we rely on life cycling modelling to really manage our risks. So that's an example of the sub-risks that the team have advised me. And then there's more specific risks, and I know that members are very interested in the condition of particular assets in the city. So as has been reported previously, actually, here that there's concerns around Avon Fixed Bridge. I mentioned Pirrose Bridge, the New Cut Walls, Peel Street Bridge, the wider network around the Cumberland Basin, St Philip's Causeway, and then part the infrastructure in the harbour around the sluices and lock gates and Prince Street Bridge. So these will range from sort of mechanical and electrical deterioration or structural concerns. That's pretty much what I'd say, except for in relation to this understanding this more generally, but also the direction of travel I referred to. I met with the risk team this week, and they're very happy to offer workshops to members around the sort of risk management framework at the council and how this particular risk area could be sort of seen through that lens, and they're very happy to offer that to members of this committee or anyone else, frankly. That's probably all I'll say for now.
Tom, then Kaz, then David.
Thank you. Obviously quite concerning. Could you just say a bit more? I've read what's in the report itself, but what can you share about the mitigating actions beyond what's in here in terms of the PMO team and the source funding?
Yeah, so in terms of active mitigating actions, the life cycling modelling is really, really important to our asset management, gives us greater understanding, and also it reduces the exposure to insurance claims to the council, because it effectively shows that the council is aware of the risk it's carrying. That enables then us to identify funding for emergency works or detailed surveys, and you'll have, I think you previously made a decision around that for Avon Fixed Bridge, and there's been some emergency works on the harbour lock gates, including surveys. So that's sort of very active mitigations. There's a reference in the report around here in the italics here around a project to be started by the PMO team. What that's effectively doing is being cognizant of opportunities such as the Structures Fund that was announced by government, not this budget, but the last statement, being in a really strong position to access that funding by understanding the sort of economic case to this sort of failure as well, and the other sort of risks of failure to the city if these things properly failed. We have a good understanding of their condition, but what is the impact of, say, a complete failure of X asset? What does that mean in terms of people being able to access services, move around, that sort of thing? So that's happening right now, and will be coming through the sort of governance process.
Thank you. And just one more question. Obviously, it talks about potholes and insurance claims. How much are we spending on settling insurance claims on damage to property from potholes? It's the last line of that paragraph 10.
So I can't give you a figure, but I'll get you one. But the information I have is that, again, going back to those inspection regimes, while we are seeing more and more claims, generally in relation to our asset, because we have those inspection regimes, we're not actually seeing more payouts as a result of it. So that speaks to that point about being aware, being prepared, manages that particular risk to the council.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of ageing infrastructure in the city, and I was interested. You went from likely to almost certain. some people might argue that because of that aging infrastructure, most of our infrastructure is almost certain to fail at some point. And I just wondered if that's likely to be the case for some of our other risks. And I don't perhaps want an answer now, because I'm very keen to take up your offer of maybe spending some time with you guys to understand this process.
Yeah, I mean, I'll work with the team to set that up with you. I mean, I think this is actually the highest risk on our corporate risk register. So there is a degree of certainty around some of these assets because they are failing. We know that when you look at, for example, the new cut walls.
And I think that would be really welcome, because whenever we've looked at this, we felt it's so high level, because we get anything that meets a certain threshold from the corporate risk register, but it doesn't necessarily give us enough information to satisfy ourselves that we're doing this. So I think having a bit of a dive into more of the detail would be something that be maybe not for actually a live committee, but something that we could take offline and work through. So I've got David next, and I don't know if Emma, David then Emma.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare an interest at the moment. It's not a pecuniary interest, but it's certainly an interest. Audit Committee will be receiving a deep dive at its next audit meeting in January about CRR 58, because we are very concerned about the possibility of things going wrong, and we want to find out all the details. And on Monday, I'm chairing the WECA Audit Committee, where we will be getting a full update on CRSTS from WECA's point of view, and I think it's very important to understand how Bristol's CRSTS contribution fits into the WECA's contribution. So you'll be able to watch both of those on YouTube or attend in person.
It would be very interesting to understand at audit the relationship with when we're looking at beginning to put the TCR funding together, and the relationship between this risk and what WECA's intentions are around what is available for maintenance in TCR. Emma.
Thank you. So I would welcome a workshop, a bit more of a deep dive into this. I think the work that Sean and his team are doing around the bridges and all that is amazing, and to see the scale of those challenges. I think what I find it hard to get my head around is, like, risk. These words seem quite small for what is quite big. And I think as a council, was probably our first duty is maintenance, and to keep everybody safe and to keep everything flowing. And before anything new, it's that basic infrastructure. It's an old city. It's, there's parts that are very, very, very old. There's other things that was built in the 60s that need to be maintained. So I think this is a really, really important area. And yeah, the more we can understand it and how those risks are put together, I think the better it is for us, because we're obviously, those projects come to us. Like I say, I really welcomed the tour of the bridges. That was really useful to sort of be able to visualize it. So yeah, I think the more we can understand, the better, because we want to obviously support that work because it is so vital.
Thank you. That wasn't a question, but if I may, this is obviously a national issue. We're not alone in this. There is kit like this all over the country in a similar condition. What I would say is that our approach to life cycle modelling, our awareness, our risk management is unusually very good, and that does put us in a strong position to understand the risk as well as access, hopefully funding to address some of these concerns.
Sorry, I do desperately want to go home. I just thought it was odd that we've gone through 3 detailed notes on the report without noting that the report was missing, that the appendix, which should include the risk register excerpt, was not part of the papers this time.
Well, I think on that note, it's probably time to close the meeting, isn't it? I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and I can't remember the date of the next meeting. It's somewhere in this 5th of February. So thank you. There we go. Thanks everyone for their attendance. The next meeting is planned for 5 p.m. on the 5th of February 2026, and I'd like to wish everyone season's greetings and a very good festive celebrations, and I'll see you all in the new year. Meeting closed.